Hello everyone and welcome to episode 26 of the SWL DXing News Report. This is Andre recording this on the 29th of June 2025. If you are joining me via Spotify or any other podcasting app, you'll find the RSS feed link in the description. If you're into shortwave, medium wave, FM, radio listening, radio news, and DXing, then you're in the right place. This month, there are some interesting headlines. The Overcomer Ministry seems to be winding down all their AM or medium wave, FM, and shortwave broadcasts except for one. Luxembourg is setting wheels in motion for DAB Plus digital radio. Voice of America reactivated its Persian service after dramatic geopolitical developments in the Middle East. And Radio Farda and Radio Martí also returned. There is news of the final sign-off from Gander VOLMET, new shortwave tests from Luxembourg, preparations underway for SAQ's 100th birthday broadcast at Grimeton, summer shortwave broadcast from Taiwan, a medium wave revival in Greece, and I end with the monthly HF propagation forecast from the NOAA. Let's start with something quite big and somewhat unexpected. The Overcomer Ministry, which is a well-known voice on shortwave, will, according to some reports, end all medium wave, FM, and shortwave broadcasts by 30 June, apparently due to financial strain. Listener contributions have dropped to the point where they can no longer sustain airtime on major platforms like WRMI, WWCR, WBCQ, WTWW, and others. Now, there is a bit of an uncertainty here. The ministry's website still promotes expansion on 300 kilowatt Bulgarian transmitters, but sources like Wavescan, Jeff White in particular, say the ministry is going off air entirely, shifting to internet only and one very low power FM station in Waterboro, South Carolina. Although oddly enough, there is no FCC construction permit visible in that area. This opens up lots of airtime across shortwave networks, so keep an eye on 9400 kHz and many other familiar Overcomer spots on shortwave to check if they will really disappear and if anything else will take their place. For DXers, this marks the end of an era. This was a very prominent and well-known voice on shortwave, although it was mostly recorded messages being played, but it was still there. So, maybe some of you might want to tune in and log any last signals before the switch off. Greece's public broadcaster, ERT, has decided to reactivate multiple medium wave stations across the country, including Rhodes, Chania, Komotini, Megara, and others. The International DRM Consortium called it an excellent decision, not only for cultural preservation, but also because medium wave radio is still a reliable backup during disasters. So for DXers in Europe, maybe it's a good idea to scan the medium wave bands to see if you can hear any of these new Greek medium wave stations. After years of deliberation, the Department of Media, Connectivity and Digital Policy in Luxembourg has picked 12 stations that will be part of the country's initial DAB Plus digital radio rollout. This includes big names like Radio Latina, RTL Today, Nostalgia Luxembourg, Eldorado, and RTL Germany Hit Radio. The official announcement came just after rewarding the multiplex contract to Broadcasting Centre Europe SA on the 3rd of June. Services are expected to start within 6 months. Luxembourg now joins the 29 other EU countries who are already offering DAB+, including countries such as Norway and Switzerland who have started phasing out FM broadcasts. And since all new cars in the EU sold after 2020 must support DAB+, it's likely that many listeners will probably be able to listen to these stations, although not everyone has a portable DAB+ radio. You may have heard earlier reports that BBC Radio 4 longwave would fall silent by the end of June. It looks like that is on pause. A final review is now underway to assess the real-world impact of switching off this longwave transmitter. While there is no new date yet, the key takeaway is that 198 kHz remains safe for a little while longer in the UK. On 12 June at 09:01 UTC, NAB Canada officially shut down its Gander VOLMET HF broadcasts. These were on 3485, 6604, 10051, and 13270 kilohertz in USB mode, of course. So this means the Gander VOLMET that was heard across the northern skies for a long time has fallen silent. It has been replaced entirely by digital means. On the 2nd of July 2025, Sweden's Grimeton radio station, home to the SAQ Alexanderson alternator, marks its 100th anniversary. Built in the 1920s, the Alexanderson alternator is one of the last functioning VLF, that's very low frequency, transmitters of its kind, using rotating machinery to generate signals on 17.2 kilohertz. To celebrate its centenary, there will be 2 live transmissions from SAQ on 17.2 kilohertz. Not many radios have VLF coverage, but if you've got one, it might be worthwhile trying to see if you can hear this, if you are in Europe. Voice of America has recalled 50 Persian language staff from administrative leave to provide live coverage in response to escalating tensions between Israel and Iran. The sudden turnaround follows the Trump staffing cuts and aims to ensure real-time coverage for Iranian audiences. Radio Farda, also a Persian language station funded by the US government through the US Agency for Global Media, also returned. Radio Farda had recently gone off air, just like VOA, part of the same set of broadcasting cuts by President Donald Trump. Along with Radio Farda, Radio Free Asia, and Radio Martí also fell silent. But now Radio Farda suddenly reappeared on shortwave in June, on the same weekend when Trump ordered military action against Iran. Radio Farda appears to be back for good, or for some time at least. Here is the Radio Farda shortwave schedule, so you can have a listen. It's on from 1700 to 1900 UTC on 9450 kilohertz. That's from Al Dabaya in the UAE. It's on from 2300 to 0400 UTC on 9620 kilohertz from Wifferton. And then from Al Dabaya at 0400 to 0700 UTC on 12035 kilohertz and 1300 to 1700 UTC on 12035 kilohertz. From Wifferton again, 1900 to 2300 UTC on 12035 kilohertz. And 2 more frequencies from Al Dabaya, 0700 to 1000 UTC on 13710 kilohertz and 1000 to 1300 UTC on 15720 kilohertz. So you can see this is quite long coverage, long broadcasting times. It's very similar to what it was before the cuts and before the station went off air. And another surprise update, Radio Martí also appears to be back on shortwave. On the 27th of June, listeners across North America picked up test transmissions from Greenville, North Carolina on 11860 and 13605 kilohertz. So the Greenville transmitter is definitely still alive and kicking. Radio Martí, of course, targets Cuba. So starting Monday the 30th of June, Radio Martí will broadcast regularly again from 1400 to 2200 UTC, Monday to Friday. So not weekends, but Monday to Friday it will be back on air. That's according to reports on various DXing groups. So monitor this. Let's see if it is actually happening. Radio Taiwan International, as usual, will transmit special programs in German and French in the European summer in July and August. So they performed some tests on Saturday and Sunday, the 28th and 29th of June, to find the best frequencies for these transmissions. These transmissions come directly from Tamsui in Taiwan, unlike the regular Radio Taiwan transmissions which come from Kostonbrod in Bulgaria, targeting Europe. So the frequencies used for the tests were 15145 kilohertz, 11995 kilohertz, and 9550 kilohertz. By the time I recorded this podcast, it wasn't certain yet which frequencies would be used for the transmissions in July in German and in August in French. But 2 of these will be selected. I will add a post to my YouTube site when I know which frequencies were selected. The transmissions in July and August will be on Fridays, Saturdays and Sundays from 1500 to 1530 UTC on one frequency and from 1530 to 1800 UTC on another frequency. So it's for an hour. Now on to some listener reception reports. Goranko sent a shortwave report from his village near Belgrade in Serbia. He uses a mix of portable radios, the Golon, the RDD, and the Washiba. Here is his list of loggings. NHK World Radio in Russian on 6165 kHz at 0445 UTC. On May the 22nd, SIO 333. China Radio International in French on 17650 kHz at 1300 UTC. Also on May the 22nd, SIO 555. Adventist World Radio in Bengali on 15430 kHz at 1315 UTC. SIO 444. On May the 24th, the following stations: China Radio International in Russian on 17640 kHz at 0325 UTC, SIO 555. Brother Stare on 9400 kHz at 1812 UTC, SIO 444. NHK World Radio in Russian on 13650 kHz at 1830 UTC, SIO 333. United Nations Radio in Russian on 13650 kHz at 1810 UTC, SIO 555. On May the 26th, Radio Exterior de España in Portuguese on 15520 kHz at 1740 UTC, SIO 555. On May the 27th, China Radio International in English on 17730 kHz at 0415 UTC, SIO 555. On May the 31st, BBC in French on 9750 kHz at 1810 UTC, SIO 555. On June the 1st, Radio Romania International in English on 9740 kHz at 0315 UTC, SIO 555. On June the 7th, Radio Vatican in French on 15565 kHz at 1700 UTC, SIO 555. On June the 18th, Radio Romania International in English on 9740 kHz at 0445 UTC, SIO 444. Radio Vatican in Portuguese on 7305 kHz at 0115 UTC, SIO 444. This was on June the 21st. Thank you so much for that report, Goranko. And I also have a report from Scotland, from Lou in Glasgow, who sent a medium wave report for the night of Sunday, June the 8th. He used the tiny SI4732 mini radio with the Texan AN200 loop antenna, which he connected via the 3.5 millimeter jack on the radio. He made some great catches across Europe. Here are his logs. Radio Rossi from Moldova on 549 kHz, music, 1,509 miles away, logged at 2246 UTC. Radio Caroline from Orford Ness on 648 kHz, music, distance of 424 miles at 2300 UTC. Radio Nacional de España 5 from Madrid on 657 kHz, sports talk, distance 1,467 miles at 2305 UTC. Ukrainian radio first channel from Pokrovske on 1278 kHz, news, distance 2,324 miles, received at 2316 UTC. Manx radio from the Isle of Man on 1368 kHz, music, distance of 240 miles, received at 23:19 UTC. Vesti FM from Grigoriopol, Moldova, on 1413 kHz, talk. Distance of 2,015 miles, 23:23 UTC. Trans World Radio from Rumouls in France on 1467 kHz. Pop music. Distance of 1189 miles. Received at 23:27 UTC. Radio Lenta from Sitkunai in Lithuania on 1557 kHz. News, talk. Distance of 1681 miles. Received at 23:35 UTC. To end, the HF propagation forecast for July. This forecast uses data from the NOAA, the Space Weather Prediction Center, and other DX sources. Geomagnetic field activity is likely to reach active levels from July the 1st to the 3rd, from the 5th to the 6th, and the 11th and the 12th, all due to recurrent coronal hole high-speed solar streams. Quiet and quiet to unsettled conditions are expected to prevail throughout the remainder of the period until the end of July. Unfortunately, there has been an increase in the concentration of free electrons in the Earth's ionosphere, and this has worsened conditions for shortwave propagation somewhat. But you should still be able to have some good catches in July. And that brings me to the end of episode 27. Thank you for joining me. If you've got station news or a reception report to share, I'd love to hear from you. Please include your location, your radio model, the frequency that you received, and SINPO or SIO codes. You can reach me at andre9@duck.com. That is ANDRE, the number 9 at DUCK.com. Thanks for listening, and until next time, happy DXing.
From a land so wide,